is episode 5 of the Fit Dads podcast. My name's Ryan Dutton. I'm joined by
Brad Thompson.
And this episode is all about how to set an example to your little one when it comes to fitness, exercise, movement. We've got some great things we want to discuss today when it comes to getting your little one into exercise and getting them into movement. I know a lot of people struggle with this for various reasons. We're going to discuss those as well. And really the aim of the kind of podcast today is just to get you guys feeling more confident about setting your little one up for an amazing win when it comes to movement and exercise. So, Brad, what's the main goal when it comes to setting people up for exercise? Where do you think they should start?
I think the earlier you can do it, it's probably a little bit easier, which if you're having to pick up, like trying to motivate a teenager to do things when they've already got maybe different habits already instilled, can be a huge challenge. So if you've got a toddler, if you've got someone who's 6 or 7 years old, it's a great age. It's a great age because they're still in that sort of play territory where movement can be playful, sport can be fun, lifting weights can be a challenge, that sort of stuff, so they can see things that way.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think that's my key, initial. What about you?
Agreed. A thought came to mind then. You can't teach old dogs new tricks, and not saying teenagers are old dogs by any stretch of the imagination, but it becomes I would say exponentially more difficult to get a teenager into movement than it does someone under the age of 10. Because they've learnt behaviours from a really early age. Same way learning languages. I can't remember the exact stat, but there was a stat about, kids can take on like 4 or 5 languages from a really early age, whereas parents just can't. We haven't got that same capacity to learn languages. And I think the same applies to exercise and movement and sport. I'm so fortunate that my dad, when we discussed this before, was really heavily into exercise and sport, and I know yours was as well. So that was a big driving force for us being in the position we're in now with our coaching businesses and with our own physiques. But the earlier you start, the better, without a shadow of a doubt.
The science behind a child's what they call neuroplasticity in the brain, where the brain is literally more pliable. Like they can learn things and they can go to sleep and all of a sudden they know a new skill. That's how it seems sometimes. So the earlier the better. Again, I know we said we wouldn't go down the sciencey route and really try but I think for people listening to understand that about how a child's brain is completely different to someone who's a bit old in the tooth, shall we say, a bit long in the tooth. That makes a big difference.
And there'll be a lot of parents listening to this who were that child who was never really pushed into exercise, and that for me is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy where if you were never really pushed into exercise as a child, how are you then going to feel confident enough to push your little one into exercise and movement? And that's a really tricky road to go down.
Have you ever heard the Bear Grylls interview where someone says in 3 words, what advice would you give to parents? And he says, example, example, example.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was so cool.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
like, he's got a good point.
Yeah, 100%.
Kids watch and they learn. It's not the monkey see, monkey do. They will do that. Just saying because I said so will only get you so far.
Of course, yeah. No, absolutely. And you'll know from being a kid, when you're asking those why. If your parent says because I said so, there's no backing behind that whatsoever.
That's the break glass, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. So you need to set the example from a really early age. And what age would you say is the right age to start introducing exercise into a kid's life?
I think ultimately for me it's how you word it as well. Like even just exercise as such, movement, play, those 2 words are probably a bit more suitable and useful.
I agree.
Yeah,
totally agree. I think exercise sounds quite serious and probably more what adults would do, but movement and playful movement.
Yeah, something that doesn't feel like a chore for them, I think. So in terms of, to answer your question, again, earlier the better. Find something your child enjoys. I always remember the first time I started squatting and throwing Teddy up in the air. Yeah. And I remember saying to him, "Oh, can you do that with your bears?" And he was doing it, and it was crazy. That's awesome. To see him copy it and not catch them, which was something to work on. But I always caught Teddy.
You don't want to make a slip up there, mate.
No, we don't.
But I think you're absolutely right. For me, in my mind, I would be totally honest, when Harlow was when she could just start standing up. Yeah. There's a video that I put on my Instagram from a long while ago now, over 6 months ago, when she could just start standing up by herself, and she would do this thing where she'd like, I'd hold her hands, she'd be stood up, and she'd bend her knees and go down to a squat position.
Nice.
And then she'd stand back up.
Yeah.
And it was almost like she was squatting. Like, I remember Amy took in a video and looking back and going, that's a squat. That's
cool.
what she's doing. And, you know, that's really early on to be thinking about stuff like that. But I honestly think from the moment they can start walking by themselves, you're introducing different motor skills and things that are going to challenge their coordination and balance, whether that's with, I don't know, I mean, we've got Walter, for example. Harlow loves throwing the ball for Walter. And when she first started throwing the ball for Walter, she used to throw it and it would like go behind her. Yeah. It wouldn't go forwards. And then when she started kind of grasping forwards, it wouldn't go forwards, it'd go down. Yeah. And now she throws it and it goes high and long, and Walter loves it. He's racing down the corridors after the ball. And just as something as simple as that is teaching the child that this is a movement that you're going to be using and can be used in future sports and activities.
I love that. Yeah, no, I think it's wicked. And yeah, we had a similar experience with Ted, literally with throwing and kicking and just, doing all sorts. And in terms of other people inspiring them as well. I took Teddy from quite a young age to watch one of my little brothers play football. Cool. So he associated a sport with his Uncle Bobby.
Oh, amazing.
And I thought, this is really cool. So to set an example via someone else is also pretty inspiring. Yeah.
Well, you know what? That's one of the things I wrote down for today is, if you really genuinely feel like you're struggling to set an example, there's various ways around that, and we'll discuss a few of those. But I think one of the best ways is actually drafting in relatives, family members, friends who are into certain sports and fitness activities. They can come in, they can spend half an hour with your child, just teaching them some things that maybe you might not feel confident enough teaching them, or you just don't understand enough. Yeah. And I think same way with the languages, get them into as many different ones as you can if you know them. Yeah. I've got a mate who lives in Paris, and his missus is really keen for them to speak English as well as French, and it's something they do every week. Yeah. I think the same applies with exercise. It's getting your kids to explore as many different exercises and movements as possible, and I keep using the word exercise. I probably should say movements and sports, but it all counts from an early age.
Definitely. And I always think of this like early exposure, like how many, for a bit of an obscure example, how many soldiers didn't know you could be a soldier until they met a soldier. I've got quite a few friends who are in the military, and they've all got quite similar stories where they met someone who was quite inspiring and they thought, they're really cool. Yeah. From a young age, and they thought, I could actually do this like as a career. I think that'd be cool. Yeah. And so seeing that, you just never know. Yeah. You never know what experience a kid's going to have that's going to like project them into a career, into a passion. You just never know. Yeah,
agreed. Like when my dad got the home gym at 12 years old, he had no idea how much I was going to be absolutely obsessed with what was in there, exploring every movement I could. And you know what? It might lead to nothing. You might get some friends over, and you got, right, this is it. We're gonna get him into rugby. My mate's a rugby player, plays every weekend. They're gonna toss the ball around a little bit. They're gonna do a little bit of rucking. This is gonna be it. They're gonna love it, and they might hate it. They might think it was the most pointless exercise ever. But all it takes is somewhere down the line, someone else asked them, a friend, a few years later, to go and play some rugby, and he says, have you ever played? I goes, yeah, I played with my uncle a little bit, and before you know it, they've re-sparked that kind of passion, and it flips on its head. So it's, again, learnt behaviours and hoping they flourish over time.
I genuinely think we'd do this episode a disservice if we didn't look at the other extreme. So we've mentioned about people who are maybe low on confidence to introduce these things. Maybe people who are a little bit full on, like sideline dads, standing on football pitches bellowing at the sons and daughters, or dance mums who get far too engrossed in just trying to smash the competition. Like, you have to think, when it stops being enjoyable for a kid, that's maybe when they stop. So I think really trying to work on that relationship that they have with whatever activity they do and empowering them a little bit to make that choice is quite cool.
A conversation we had before the podcast was, for every Tiger Woods, there's 50 kids with similar abilities who were pushed the same amount as Tiger Woods. They just couldn't hack it, and they didn't enjoy it, and actually it had the opposite effect. Tiger Woods was someone, obviously, who was resilient, stuck it out. He was probably, dare I say, forced into playing golf a lot of the time by his dad, who was a mad, passionate golfer himself. And they created something unbelievably special in terms of his ability. but it's not for everyone. And that high level elite sport within kids is a real fine line between who's enjoying this more, who's this for more. Is it more for the kids or is it more for the parents? And how do you decipher at that early age? Because I guess enjoyment is one, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
But I guarantee there was times when Tiger Woods hated it, didn't want to play golf again, got a roasting from his dad. You ask him today, was it all worth it? What do you reckon he'd say?
Depends who he's talking to. If a pure sporting capacity, probably.
Yeah.
But without going too deep with it, you've seen some of the struggles that he's had.
Definitely.
Maybe,
From a psychological point of view.
Maybe he'd argue not. Because maybe his brain can't quite compute that you can play, you can have fun. Everything doesn't have to be serious all the time, but does that distort your worldview? We have no idea.
Yeah.
But
I think if you're going to go down that route with your child into elite sport, as I said, it's a bit of a tightrope in terms of how much you make them do things that they probably don't want to do, and it's instilling quite high levels of discipline and motivation into a kid at an age when they don't really understand the concept of that. They just get into it because it's fun, and they probably got a bit of a, we would think probably at an elite level, quite a good ability to play that sport.
Yeah. I think it's interesting you said the word discipline then, because that's probably got quite negative connotations by itself. One of my favourite authors is a guy called Jocko Willink, who was an ex-Navy SEAL. I think he's unbelievable. And he talks discipline equals freedom. And I struggle to disagree with that. If you are disciplined, you can have everything you ever want.
Yeah.
And people don't see discipline as that. People maybe have negative connotations about that word. So if you want to teach your child to be not just a functioning member of society, but someone who is a high performer, someone who is happy and healthy, teaching them that discipline of turning up and doing things that they enjoy, but trying to gamify it a little bit, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that making it fun is priority number one. And then enjoyment, I think, comes second to that. Because if it's fun, they'll enjoy it. But you have to, like I say, it's such a fine line you tread when you're going from setting the example, getting them into it, and then pushing them to places where maybe, it's tricky, a bit sketchy. Yeah.
Obviously, coming away from the extreme side of things now, where would you recommend somebody starts? Because when I saw the notes that you sent me across, I just thought some of the ideas were really cool in terms of movement. Isn't just sports and training. Like, there's all sorts of types of movement you can do. So if someone is listening who maybe wants to set that example and wants to promote that movement, what could they do?
I think the main thing is parents who struggle to set an example for their kids generally are parents who don't have a lot of confidence themselves around exercise and sport. And what I'll really, really drive home the message of is kids have no concept of fitness amongst adults. They have no concept of who's fitter and who's not. They just see movement, and that's all they're influenced by. If you feel like generally you're a bigger parent or you're not very well versed when it comes to exercise and movement, that has no bear on what your child will pick up. As long as you're promoting a message of this is how we operate day to day in terms of a movement perspective, they will copy that.
Yeah, I think that's wicked. And I remember speaking to one of my clients a couple of weeks ago, and they said, if you can differentiate, this is what we need to do and this is what we'd like to do. It's almost like, well, let's do the things that we definitely need to do, like the household chores, and then we can go and enjoy what we like to do.
Yeah.
If a kid doesn't really know what they like to do, that's a challenge in itself. So I think setting the example is being a curious parent yourself, being someone who you would be happy if your child grew up to be. Yeah. I think that's quite a deep one, but I can honestly say that, for example, if Teddy grew up to be very similar to Amy, I'd be over the moon. Because,
it's the same. Yeah, it's a hard perspective to have that because, as I've mentioned, my miss isn't really into exercise. And for whatever reason, Harlow didn't want to play sports much. She didn't want to really push herself, but she was happy just doing the occasional walk here and there.
Yeah.
I'd be okay with that as well, as long as she understands movement doesn't have to be at an elite level. It doesn't have to be, something you obsess over. It just has to be something that you do.
Yeah.
And And there's so many life lessons there for like self-confidence as well around setting those examples.
There's an interview with Jude Bellingham, England. I'm going to say a legend already because I think he's fantastic.
Pretty
I
much,
love Jude, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think
he's set for stardom, that lad.
He's incredible. And he did an interview at Borussia Dortmund when he was there. And they asked him, when did you really think I can be a professional footballer? And it was late. Like,
really?
telling the story about how his mum and dad took him to some sporting camp, and he just used to throw it and like pick grass for an hour, like wasn't bothered. And then one day it just clicked, and he thought, I love this. I know what number I want to be. I want to know. I know what position I want to play. And I just thought it was such a cool story because if you're seeing what he's doing now at 20 years old,
I know.
It's incredible, and that's all his own choice.
Yeah.
But his mum and dad set such an amazing example for him by the looks of it. Amazing.
Yeah. And I think that probably during those moments when he was a kid, they could see he wasn't that interested. Yeah. But it was just something that was keeping him ticking over from a sports activity, social point of view. And they just kept turning up. And you never know how your kid's going to respond. But you just keep putting them in those environments where they can promote good, positive movements, and let them make the decision whether they want to take it to an elite level, whether they want to do it as a hobby, whether it's something they'll do occasionally. Yeah. It reminds me, actually, it reminds me of when I was a kid, definitely not on the same level of Jim, by the way, but I was shocking when I was a kid, like from the age of kind of 4 when I first started playing football, to probably the age of about 8, 9, I was on the bench every single game. And my dad asked me at one point, do you want to keep doing this? Do you want to keep coming and showing up? And you're potentially only getting half a game, if that. And I said, you know what? It's movement, it's sport. I enjoy playing with lads. I like the training. Let's just keep doing it. And then probably around 8, 9, 10, I remember just filling out a little bit, feeling a little bit stronger, growing a little bit more than everyone else. And suddenly I could hold my own on the pitch more so than some of the lads in my position. And that was a really nice feeling of breaking through that barrier and feeling like I could actually perform now and not just being the kid on the sideline who only got half a game. It was such a nice feeling. And same thing, just sticking it out through times when I didn't really want to do it. It's so important.
A quick story about my childhood. Okay. When I was 11, I learned how to ride a bike.
I remember you saying that, actually. Yeah, you were a late bloomer with the bike.
A handful of people know that, and the reason why was purely because we went on a residential and I didn't want to look silly. And I think I'd just never been bothered about it before. Yeah. And my mum and dad didn't really sort of chase it and say like, oh, if you're not bothered, that's fine. Yeah. And I always remember that horrible feeling of like, I'm going on this residential, I'm going to look really silly. And like, at that time, it was the worst thing in the world that could have happened to me.
What's a residential?
Like literally go on like a school trip.
Okay.
But we went to like, I think it was Thornbridge. So we went to Thornbridge for like 3 or 4 days doing like...
And you knew you were going to be riding bikes?
Yeah, like adventure play. And I'm 11 years old. I weren't far off this size, to be fair. I thought I really need to learn. Otherwise, you know what it's like social pressures at that age.
Absolutely.
And if anyone's followed like me on Instagram, like I regularly put on little stories about my little boy. He loves his bike and he's doing so well with it. Yeah, like he's brilliant.
Stabilizer on, but he's hammering the pedals.
Oh, he's hammering it. Yeah, he's hammering it, and like just giving him that sort of skill because he wants it, and telling him that is an option. It is amazing. So I set an example. I'm going to tell him that story one day.
Absolutely,
he's going to laugh at me
for sure.
That's great.
We're all late bloomers to something, and riding a bike. It's a funny one, isn't it? Because was your dad into cycling?
Not really. No. I think I tell this story a little bit, but my world was quite insular. Where like, you know, my dad, I'm one of 3 as you are, and it was quite a busy life, you know. So being introduced to new things. I remember first getting to secondary school and seeing that people did like ice hockey for a living, like for a hobby, and I'm just like, what? Yeah. What do you mean? Like, it blew my mind.
Yeah, I remember meeting a guy at uni actually who played ice hockey before he came to uni, and he'd kind of given it up a little bit. And I remember going, how do you even get into ice hockey as a kid? Like, what path led you there? Maybe it was just going to the ice rink. They found a bit of a talent for skating. Next thing you know, they kind of go into these ice hockey trials and stuff like that. But there's certain sports where you go, how did you... I mean, you watch the Olympics now and you see these guys like pole vaulting, and you're like, how did you get into pole vault? But it's just gymnastics, I guess, isn't it, from a kid, and that develops from there. You kind of find your niche within the gymnastics area, but it just highlights there's so many routes into sport, though. You don't have to be the linear football rugby. There's so many things you can get into.
Yeah. Again, if you enjoy it, I think it's all about play. Like if you're good at something, you're probably going to stick it out because you're good at it and you enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Moving on then, so we're going off tangents again, as we always do, but we'll circle it back to solutions, ways of getting parents equipped to get their child into exercise. What other things have you got in mind when it comes to that?
I think the key thing for me is disguising things as a game a little bit, like just making it fun.
Yeah.
If you know the importance of it, it's a case of, again, from a mindset perspective, parents really trying to zoom out a little bit and think of the long term. So if it feels a bit silly right now, or it feels difficult to do, if you can zoom out and look at things on the broader picture, that's going to be really important. And then you can zoom back in again and think, okay, let's do this today, or ask them what they want to do. Especially if you've got kids who are teenagers, pre-teens, kids who have strong opinions already.
Yeah.
See if there's anything they want to do. Broaden their horizons. And ultimately, for you as a parent, give them the opportunities, but also you do things that potentially you're scared of. I'm going to quote a film now, Ryan, which is not the film that you're going to expect. From The Good Dinosaur.
The Good Dinosaur.
The Good Dinosaur on Disney.
I don't know this movie.
Which is very good. There's a quote in it which says, basically, the good dinosaur Arlo sort of says to this massive, like T-Rex, he's huge. He says, well, you're not scared of anything. And he's like, I am scared. He says, but to be brave, you have to be scared. And that's the point. So if you are scared of anything, you have to sort of be brave. Like no one's born brave.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just that willingness to overcome certain fears. And
I couldn't agree more with that. And I've also got a picture of you sat on the sofa going, wow, that's really profound watching this dinosaur movie.
Yeah, it's good. It's good film.
But it rings so true, isn't it, in terms of when kids are nervous about it themselves, because maybe the parent isn't the one nervous. Potentially the kid might be the one that's a little bit nervous about getting into sports. They see, it can be little things like if they've had moments in their childhood where there's been a little bit of rough and tumble and they've not liked it, and they've not liked physical activities, or just not drawn to it. Maybe they're more academic for whatever reason, which is obviously not a bad thing at all either. But they might not have that kind of confidence and like I said, bravery to go and explore new sports. So I think having that fun element to it is key.
Watch The Good Dinosaur.
That's the kind of message there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's it.
We've obviously mentioned bringing relatives into the equation, and I think even just as something I wrote down here, even just something as simple as taking them on walks with you, like just getting them used to moving, and then whilst you're out walking, just go, right, I'm going to race you to that lamppost. And you have a little race, and they go, that's quite tough. And then you let them win a little bit, and then you win a little bit, and you have this little game. And it is, again, making it fun. It's gamifying everything, making it into even like competition. Kids might not like competing with other kids, but they might like competing with you. They might feel comfortable enough competing with you. And that's a great way of just nurturing that little feeling of competitiveness that may lead to something more substantial down the line.
I think, again, just making them comfortable with competition as well, because realistically, life is competition. You leave school, you go to uni, you might pass out of uni, and then all of a sudden you're applying for jobs and you're competing against other people. Yeah. If you have a massive massive case of self-doubt, it's really tough to overcome.
Definitely.
So it's that you've got to have that element of self-belief, and that comes from doing things consistently.
I've seen that so much with clients actually who I've taken on, who've just left uni or they're in the mid-20s and they're really, really low on confidence. And then you start delving into what they did as a kid, and you realise they weren't into sports. They never had those kind of setbacks and challenges. And when all that hits them, when they're out in the real world, it can be really, really damaging.
And I think you've mentioned exercise a couple of times and movement, but it literally is resilience building.
Yeah,
if you are actually developing and building your resilience to life's problems, that's what we're here to do as parents.
I think of so many times coming back to obviously myself not being great as a footballer at a very early age, and then turning that around a little bit. It was resilience. It was, and I even remember times during certain games where we knew we were a good team, but we'd be getting spanked 3-4-0, and you're like, God, and it gets half time, and you're like, what's going to happen here, lads? And this is character building for that team to come together and say, nah, we're not done here. We might have had lack of a better phrase, a shit first half, but we're going to come out swinging this next half. And that is camaraderie, it's character building, it's team building, it's even like teaching kids how to work together as a team, which will serve you so well in later life when you're working in teams and you've got colleagues. And you can sometimes see, I think, I'm not sure if you've ever had jobs where you've got one guy who doesn't seem to connect with the team for whatever reason, or he's a little bit shy in himself and maybe doesn't have the best confidence. And I guarantee that's a kid who early on in his life just never had that kind of team around him. No one really said him, you can do this, you're part of this team, you're a valued member. So those aspects of a kid's life is so important to promote and flourish.
It's exposing them to those microaggressions, so when potentially big aggressions come up, they can deal with it. They've got the shield to be able to deflect it away.
Absolutely, for sure. I think we've covered a lot there. We've been over the problems, some solutions, but I think just circling back to what we said maybe on the last episode, where if anyone is struggling with this, we're more than happy to have that conversation. We've got a lot more ideas when it comes to helping out parents from a real practical side of things, like practical solutions and things that can be applicable right now. So whether it's social media, whether it's through our kind of emails, which will be online, we'd love to answer questions anyone has about this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. There's so much nuance in this stuff and there's so much context to get that, like we said, we're not experts with dealing with children and getting them into sport, but we're experts in dealing with adults and professionals and busy people and parents. And if we can help you to promote that, then fantastic.
Yeah. And if that's something that you think will help your child in the long run, then look, this is the Fit Dads podcast. This is us giving you applicable advice into how to boost not only your own fitness and health, but also all those around you. So,
and again, just I suppose my parting message in all this is try and be someone that you want your child to be proud of. I think that's a very deep way to finish it, but that's ultimately why we're doing this and why we are so passionate about this message.
We want every parent to be their kid's hero, and setting examples from a physical standpoint is a great place to start with that. Absolutely. Guys, thank you for joining us for episode 5 of the Fit Dads podcast. We'll see you on the next one.
See you soon.